Brad and Tom got to scare the daylights out of the new campers. That was my dog sneezing. Guys, it is time for the third book, The Scariest Stories You've Ever Heard, Part 3. And this one was written by Tracey E. Dils. So the one that I have chosen to read to you from this book is Horror Weekend. This is a story that I remember very clearly, even though I have not read it in years and years and years. It's one that sticks with you. Horror Weekend. It was time for the part of camp that junior counselors Brad Evans and Tom Benson liked the best. It was Horror Weekend, the weekend that Brad and Tom got to scare the daylights out of the new campers. On Friday night, the boys would tell their new campers a round of ghost stories, including the creepiest story of them all, the story of the old Tolliver place. The story was a really good one. The old Tolliver mansion stood at the bend in the road near the entrance of the camp. The parents of a boy named Mac Tolliver once owned all the land that the camp stood on. When they fell into hard times, they had to sell off the land to the camp. Poor Mac lost his mind. He loved to explore the woods that were now camp property. He continued to play there for a while after his parents sold it, until one fateful summer day when he ran into two campers. The campers teased him and called him all kinds of horrible names, and then they beat him up. The next day, the campers were found hanging from two trees near the house, their throats slashed. Mac's parents, the ones he blamed for selling his beloved woods to the camp, were found hanging in a bedroom of the old house, their throats slashed too. Mac had written his name in blood on the bedroom wall, but no one ever heard from him again. Brad and Tom had told the story so many times that they didn't really stop to think if it could be true. All they knew was that it was the perfect ghost story, especially because on Saturday night, the new campers would be spending the night in the old Tolliver mansion. All the counselors claimed, winking at each other, that the house was haunted by poor Mac Tolliver's ghost. Of course, Brad and Tom had to spend some time trying to make the old mansion look haunted, but the job wasn't very tough. No one had lived in the Tolliver house for years, as far as they could tell. There were cobwebs over all of the doorways and hanging from the ceiling. All of the furniture was covered with grayish sheets. When the wind blew just right, it made a howling sound through the rafters, and every inch of the house creaked. You didn't have to try very hard to believe that Mac Tolliver, or the people he had killed, might come back someday. But the boys livened the place up anyway. They fixed a branch against the window so that every time the wind blew, it would scratch at the pane, and they tape recorded the sounds of screams and hid the tape recorder underneath the cellar door. Then they took a knife and made scratch marks on the door inside the room where Mac's parents had been killed. When the house was all ready, they headed back to camp to tell the gruesome tale of Mac Tolliver. The new campers were an assorted lot. 3 tough boys from the inner city who didn't seem frightened of anything, a farm kid from Indiana who was twice as big as anyone else, and a nerdy genius type who had spent most of the first few days of camp playing with his calculator. And finally there was Cam Revelot. Cam was the perfect victim, Brad and Tom decided. He was easily startled by something as simple as a walnut falling on the roof of the cabin. And he always seemed cold, too. Brad noticed that Cam was always shivering and rubbing his hands. His skin had a slightly greenish tint to it, too, as if he was almost always just about to get sick. Yep, Cam was the perfect victim, and Brad and Tom couldn't wait to scare the wits out of him. That night, they told the story of the Tolliver murder around the campfire, and most of the boys just shrugged it off. Cam listened, his eyes wide. After the boys went off to the bunks, Brad and Tom noticed that Cam sat upright in his bed, his eyes blankly staring forward until the counselors dozed off. The next day, all the young campers woke up ready for the hike to the Tolliver place. No one seemed the least bit frightened, just anxious to get it over with. Only Cam seemed slightly excited, although he jumped when Brad blew the whistle for roll call. Right after breakfast, though, Brad and Tom noticed that the boys seemed a bit flushed. Everyone but Cam, that is, who was still complaining about how cold it was in the cabin. As they got their gear ready, the boys one by one turned green and then disappeared into the bathroom. Before Brad and Tom knew it, everyone seemed to have a severe case of the stomach flu. Only Cam seemed to be unaffected by the flu. And compared to the way that the other boys looked, he seemed downright healthy. Brad and Tom shook their heads in disappointment. "I guess we'll have to cancel Horror Weekend," Brad said to Tom in a low voice. "It'll be the first time in 10 years that a camper hasn't slept in the Tolliver mansion," Tom said. "And this is probably my last year as a counselor." I guess it's just as well, Brad said. The only kid who would really be scared is Cam over there, and he's the only one healthy enough to go. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Tom asked with a sly smile on his face. Tom, you've got to be kidding. It's bad enough to have a whole bunch of campers spend the night at the Tolliver place, but to send poor Cam over by himself, that just wouldn't be fair. He'd die of fright for sure. Well, Tom said with a wicked grin on his face, Cam wouldn't have to be alone. I could go with him, you know. Then I could make it really scary. You could stay here with the sickies. If you ask me, you're the sickie, Brad answered. Come on, Brad, Tom pleaded. This is my last chance to really scare someone. And this Cam, well, he'd be great to scare. He's such a little snot-nose after all. Well, he is kind of a wimp. And all he does is complain, Brad agreed. But maybe you shouldn't go out there by yourself. You know they never found Mac Tolliver. Oh, come on, Brad, it's just a story, remember? Tom asked, shaking his head. Geez, you're worse than that little wimp Cam. Tom looked at Brad, and besides, he said, I'd rather be there than here with a bunch of barfing brats. Okay, you win, Brad said. Take Cam and get going. We'll see you at breakfast tomorrow. That is, if any of these guys can stomach breakfast by then. Brad watched as Tom gathered up his things and headed for the door. Tom didn't have to work on Cam very hard to get him to go. By that time, the cabin was full of sick kids. Cam seemed pretty happy to get out of there. As they headed down the path, Tom winked at Brad. The day wore on, and the campers seemed to be getting better. By 4, they were all talking about the Tolliver place. They begged and pleaded with Brad to take them there. If they hurried, they said, they could make it before dark. Brad looked around at the group. He had to admit that he was pretty disappointed himself about missing the highlight of Horror Weekend, and besides, he felt sorry for Tom having to spend the night there by himself with that sniffling Cam. He'd probably end up wiping the kid's nose all night, and that was no way to spend your last summer at camp. Brad gave in. The kids loaded up their gear, and the whole gang headed out of the door. The hike would take a couple of hours, and nightfall was coming soon, but there was a full moon, so the hike wasn't as tough as it could have been. Brad led the way, talking about the Tolliver story as they walked. He told them Mac Tolliver could still be around, in the woods, behind the next rock, anywhere. He reminded them that the ghosts of the dead campers could be heard on the night of the full moon, screaming for their lives, begging for mercy. Just as he mentioned the screaming, the mansion came into view, and a cry broke the night. Perfect timing, Brad thought to himself. The campers looked at each other and then shook their heads. He rigged the whole thing, the kid from Indiana said. Yeah, the nerdy kid added. He timed our entrance perfectly. Just then they heard another scream, this one sharper than the first, coming from the second floor of the old house. Brad grinned. Tom sure is hamming it up for Cam, he thought. Brad led the boys to the front door of the house. As he touched the knob, he heard a groan from the upstairs room and slow, creaking footsteps. That Tom, he thought to himself, and glanced at the campers. You guys game? He asked. Yeah, said one of the inner city kids. This is just hocus-pocus junk. Let's go inside and prove it. He's right, said his buddy. Who's afraid of this corny stuff? I've seen scarier stuff right outside my window in the city. The group entered the house slowly. Except for a few creaking floorboards, the house was silent. The screaming had stopped. See, said the kid from Indiana, nothing here. I knew it was all sound effects. Just then, there came a thump, thump, thump sound from upstairs. Tom, Brad called, heading for the stairs. Cam? The thump, thump, thump came again. Hey, Brad said, you guys cut that out. Are you up there or what? Yeah, right, said one of the inner city kids. Do you expect us to believe that something weird's going on? You must think we're pretty stupid. But the thumping sound continued. The best thing to do, said the nerd, is to investigate. You guys stay here, Brad said. I'll go first. Brad started up the stairs. Hey, wait for us, the kid from Indiana said, following him. The thumping became louder. Yeah, said the rest of the kids. The sound of their voices echoed through the old house. Brad climbed the stairs, the rest of the boys at his heels. He figured that this was one of Tom's pranks, but he couldn't quite shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. After all, Tom hadn't even known they were coming. How could he have set something like this up so quickly? And where was that Cam kid anyway? He wasn't the kind of kid who would have helped Tom play this kind of prank. They were at the top of the steps now, following the sound. It was getting louder, and it seemed to be coming from the bedroom at the end of the hall. The bedroom where Mac Tolliver had killed his parents. Brad reached for the doorknob. Thump, thump. The sound kept on coming. But now there was another strange sound with it, one that sounded like water dripping. Brad turned the knob and held his breath. The boys snickered, but it was a nervous kind of laughter. Brad opened the door. Then he and the campers screamed. Hanging in front of them from a noose was Tom. His body was swinging ever so slightly, making thumping sounds against the wall opposite the door. Blood was dripping from Tom's throat. "He's faking," one of the kids said. "That's fake blood." But when Brad slowly approached the body and looked into Tom's open, bulging, staring eyes, he could tell that he was dead. Brad shook his head in disbelief and horror, and when he looked down at the rest of the body, he could tell how Tom had died. His neck had been slashed, just like the Tollivers had been 10 years earlier. The campers had realized what had happened. A few were crying softly. "But who? How?" Brad stammered. His question was soon answered. On the wall, written in blood, Tom's blood, was the name Cam Revelot. The bloody letters reflected in the mirror of the dresser across the room told Brad all he needed to know. Mac Tolliver had come back, and he had claimed his revenge once more. Have a spooky day.